Grüß, willkommen in einem freaking video. Welcome to yet another exciting video, in this case covering episodes 62 to 67 in Season 3 of Star Trek, the original series. This video looks at a number of episodes of Star Trek, the original series or generation, to identify historical references which can be used to determine the original history of the Star Trek universe. Special thanks to the transcripts which can be found on the TOS site. The episode order used in this video is the production order. In order to understand the development of the history or vision of this series, we need to study the episodes in the order that they were written. While I'm uncertain of the exact writing order, the production order is about as close as I can get. When Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek back in 1966, he had a vision which remained basically consistent over the following 3 years. The animated series and early movies retained this consistency in the most part. When The Next Generation was released in 1987, Gene's vision had changed and the past needed to change in order to be consistent with this new vision. This video series will look at the original vision of Star Trek, starting with the earliest source material. Any historical facts from later sources which contradict the earlier references must be assumed to be an error. Minor changes in nomenclature will be obviously excused. Is There, in Truth, No Beauty is the 5th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 62nd episode produced. Its stardate is 5630.7 and its original air date was the 18th of October 1968. The Medusans are an alien race which are probably a member of the Federation. They have a home planet which I assume may be called Medusa. Quote, while the thoughts of the Medusans are the most sublime in the galaxy, their physical appearance is exactly the opposite. During this episode, the Enterprise is sent well outside the galaxy and is unable to return for some reason. Spock indicates they entered a space-time continuum, whatever that particularly means. Quote, the Enterprise lies derelict in uncharted space. We are eventually far outside our own galaxy. The key takeaway from this episode is that we discover yet another Federation planet, the Medusan home planet. Its name is unknown, but Medusa is probably a good name. The Empath is the 12th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 63rd episode produced. Its stardate is 5121.5 and its original air date was 6th of December 1968. In this episode, we discovered the Federation has set up a research base on the second planet of the Minarian star system. The star system will go nova. Apparently, there are civilizations on other planets, or more likely in close-by star systems, which will also be destroyed and which apparently the Federation is completely unaware of. Quote, orbiting the second planet in the Minarian star system. 6 months ago, a research station was established. We do learn about another alien planet, this time Manarik 4. It's unknown if it's inhabited or if it's a member of the Federation, but it is certainly an alien planet. Quote, the sandbats of Manarik 4 appear to be inanimate rock crystals, Doctor, until they attack. We are also shown an advanced race called the Vians, which wish to save one of the civilizations being threatened with destruction. Where they come from, who they are, is completely unknown. They look like first cousins to the TOS people, which is in the script notes. Perhaps they are the preservers or descendants of the preservers. If so, their morality leaves a lot to be desired. Quote, we are Vians, do not interfere. The episode shows another alien inhabitant called Gem. Gem is an empath inhabiting one of the planets being threatened with extinction. She is mute. I have no idea if any other civilizations are being tested, but this is implied. Quote, she's a mute Jim, no vocal cords, not even vestigial. Key takeaway from this episode is that we discover an advanced civilization called the Vians, but we have no idea where their planet or planets reside. They could have come from anywhere. It's possible they are linked to the preservers, and as they look like the inhabitants of Talos, perhaps there is a link there as well. The Talosians went underground in 198,000 BC, but perhaps some did not, and they eventually became the preservers. The second planet of the Minarian star system has a Federation research base on it. The Venarians are also using this for their test to determine who to save. There must be at least 2 civilizations threatened by the nova. They could be in the Minarian star system or close by. One is the planet of the Empath called Gem. I will call this planet Gem. I have no idea of the other planets or civilization. Presumably they will be destroyed. Finally, an alien planet is mentioned, Minarik 4. It's probably an uninhabited alien planet. The Tholium Webb is the 9th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 64th episode produced. Its stardate is 5693.2 and its original air date was the 15th of November 1968. The episode shows a Federation ship called Defiant, and this ship is missing. This appears to be a sister ship to the Enterprise. According to Memory Alpha, this was the USS Defiant, NCC 1764, and was a Constitution-class starship of the 23rd century. Quote, "The Enterprise is approaching the last reported position of the starship Defiant, which vanished without trace 3 weeks ago. We are in unsurveyed territory." The spot the Defiant was lost allows different universes to overlap. Perhaps something similar to the way the evil universe links with the universe that we live in at the present moment. Who knows? The fabric of space is very weak here. If we disturb it, there will be no chance of retrieving the captain alive, says Spock. We're shown another alien nation, in this case the Tholium Assembly. This is probably a multi-planet political unit consisting of a single race. It seems the Federation is aware of this because of the comment, "the traditional punctuality of the Tholians." Quote, "You are trespassing in the territory annex of the Tholium Assembly." The key takeaways from this episode is the name of a Federation starship, in this case a constitutional class starship, which is called the Defiant. The other is the existence of another alien race, the Tholians. They would have at least consisted of a single home planet and probably consisted of many other planets. While they were known by the Federation before this episode, this is the first time we ever discover them in the series. For the World is Hollow and I've Touched the Sky is the 8th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 65th episode produced. Its stardate is 5476.3 and its original air date was the 8th of November 1968. In this episode, the Enterprise encounters an asteroid which has been used as a generation starship. It seems to be called Yonada and was probably launched about 10,000 years ago, if not older. Quote, "Asteroid has an outer shell which is hollow. It surrounds an independent inner core, which has a breathable atmosphere." The home planet of the Yonada generation starship is Fabrini, which was a planet destroyed by a nova. This civilization must have had some space flight to allow its language to survive after 10,000 years, as its home planets were destroyed. Let's assume it established some form of repository of its history in a faraway planet, which was discovered by the Federation and decoded. Quote, "Fabrini, didn't the Fabrini sun go nova and destroy its planets?" We get the name of yet another Federation colony, in this case called Daran 5. It may be a full member, but was more likely a well-developed colony. It's unknown if it's human or alien, but it's probably at least humanoid, otherwise, it would not be a good home for the survivors of the Fabrini. Quote, "We are on a parallel course with Yonada. It is still on a collision course with Daran 5. Key takeaways from this episode is that Fabrini was a planet which was destroyed 10,000 years ago, but managed to send off a colony ship in an asteroid, basically a generation starship. They must have also deposited information on a planet far away not to be destroyed in the nova to allow the Federation to recognise its writings. Daran 5 looks like a Federation member or colony planet, probably a well-developed colony with humans or humanoids inhabiting it. The Day of the Dove is the 7th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 66th episode produced. Its stardate is unknown and its original air date was the 1st of November 1968. In the episode, we discovered there is a colony on Beta 12 which has been destroyed. We later discovered this was an illusion, but the number of people in a newly established colony is set at about 100, and that's a valid piece of data. Quote, "An entire human colony, a whole settlement, 100 men, women and children." Also in this episode, we discovered there was a peace treaty which had been in place for 3 years and which both sides managed to obey, which is a bit of a stretch. The last war, which was stopped by an alien race in 2264, was actually 2 years ago. I suspect an error factor of 1 year is reasonable because we're never really certain what year we're currently in. Quote, "For 3 years, the Federation and the Klingon Empire have been at peace. A treaty we have honoured to the letter." In this episode, we discover the Federation as a research outpost on Arcanus 4, which was attacked by the Klingons. Part of this was an illusion, but the research station may have been real. However, the last long-term conflict was in 2245 or about, so I suspect some mixed memories are occurring here. Remember, the alien is playing with the people's minds. Quote, "You killed my brother, Pietre, the Arcanus 4 research outpost. 100 peaceful people massacred." In this episode, there is an alien life force which feeds on hate. We have no idea of its origin and there's no communication with it. Quote, "Captain, it's an alien life force, a single entity." One of the Klingons does mention that there are poor planets in the Klingon Empire, which is the reason why they are so aggressive. I assume what she really meant to say is that many of the planets are poor, because if there's only a few, that's not really any excuse to be aggressive. This actually makes sense. I've done another analysis of where the Klingon Empire exists, and the density of stars in the area which it could possibly reside in is much reduced compared to where Terra is, or Earth is. So there could be some validity in this. Quote, "We have always fought. We must. We are hunters, Captain, tracking and taking what we need. There are poor planets in the Klingon system. We must push outward if we are to survive." Key takeaways that we've discovered in this episode: there is a planet called Beta 12, which is uninhabited. We discovered there is a Federation research station on Arcanus 4, which was attacked by the Klingons, possibly in 2245, killing 100 people. I'm uncertain how much of this was real or an illusion created by the alien, but seems reasonable. The Klingons have poor planets, which could explain why they are so aggressive. Plato's Stepchildren is the 10th episode of the 3rd season. It was the 67th episode produced. Its stardate is 5784.3 and its original air date was 22nd of November 1968. During this episode, the Enterprise surveys an unknown planet and discovers no inhabitants, but then later they receive a distress call from it. Quote, "We're responding to desperate distress calls from an unknown planet. My science officer, Mr. Spock, is unable to account for this, since he reported no signs of life on the planet." The inhabitants of this unknown planet, called Plato, come from the planet of Sandara, which experienced a supernova millennium ago. The survivors fled and landed on Earth about 360 BC before leaving and going to the unknown planet, which I call Plato. The supernova occurred sometime before 360 BC. Quote, "Oh, Platonians, I'm sure you've never heard of us. Our native star is Sandara. Millennia ago, just before it went nova, we managed to escape." The survivors of Sandara arrived on Earth in 360 BC and lived with the Greeks, picking up the teachings of Plato. I suppose they must have just missed the other aliens who lived in ancient Greece a bit earlier. I suppose the Greek civilization could be identified as collapsing when the Romans took it over, perhaps about 150 BC, but a later quote in the episode indicates that the Sandarians left in 234 BC. Quote, "Dr. McCoy is endeavouring to treat the leader of a strange group of people. When their planet novaed millennia ago, they transported themselves to Earth in the times of Socrates and Plato. After the death of the Greek civilization they idolized, they came to this planet and created for themselves a utopia patterned after it." Based on a single quote, we discovered the survivors of Sandara arrived on this unknown planet, which I call Plato, in 234 BC. Quote, 2,500 years ago, a band of hearty vagabonds arrived on this barren, rough-hewn planet. Key takeaways from this episode is that we discovered there is a planet called Sandara, which housed an advanced civilization, but their sun went nova before 360 BC. Survivors fled and landed on Earth about 260 BC and then left before 234 BC to found a new home on a planet which I am calling Plato in, let's say, 234 BC. Of course, there's a bit of a plus or minus in the dates because there must be a period of time involved in travelling to all these different locations. And so we come to an end of this video. The episode scripts can be found using the URL shown. Studying the early episodes make it obvious that many of the latter Star Trek TV series and movies and shows do not really align with the original vision of the series. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.